ricksmithshow.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Budget, priorities, or, well, the lack thereof. Lots of nonsense, lots of pink fluffy unicorns, magic dust. Oh, my goodness. And look, this Trump budget has 0% chance of actually becoming law. But it does show us, it does give us a list of his priorities, where the mind is. And I reach out to my Trump supporters. When are you going to wake up? You should read this. Kind of important. Just, kind of important. Remember how, we're not going to cut Social Security. We're not going to cut Medicare. We're not going to go after the poor people. We're going to keep, that. No. They're looking at massive cuts. Remember how we were going to rebuild the country? It was going to be $1 trillion. We're going to spend $1 trillion on rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Every media headline today was $1.5 trillion of spending. Well, if somehow you can take $200 billion and parlay that into $1.5 trillion, okay, then that's going to happen. And if you're going to do that, and if you have the magic beans or the magic dust or whatever it is, the wand, please let me know how I can take some of my money and get a $7.50 per dollar return on investment. Let me know how that happens. Because the reality is it doesn't. Now, they've used these mechanisms in the past. None of this is new. Usually it's a 3-to-1. Federal government spends $1, local spends $3, along with some private investment money. It's 3-to-1, 7.5, really a stretch. And this budget is one of those things that, my first reaction to it when I read it, and as I read through the highlights and the stories that were coming out, were this is really rose-colored glasses thinking. This is the most optimistic projections possible. By far the most optimistic part of it. But here's the thing. Even doing that with the most optimistic, forward-thinking, however you want to put it, still adds $7 trillion to our deficits over the next decade. And you go, hold on, wait a second, stop. Where is the fiscal sanity? Because, understand, this is the rose-colored glasses number. $7 trillion is the best case scenario. And we know that revenues are going to tank in the next year or two and over the next decade. We know it's going to happen because of the tax bill. We know it's going to. So, as I said, get ready for the Trump depression. I'm not even being optimistic of saying a recession. We continue down this path, you're talking depression. We are spending every dollar that we don't have, and yet where are the conservatives? Where are the voices of sanity on the Republican side? Is it possible that they, like I, know this isn't going anywhere? This isn't the budget. This is just him saying, this is my list of priorities. We're going to spend $200 billion on rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Now, understand, $200 billion sounds like a lot of money over the next decade. That's $20 billion each and every year. Yet, here's the problem. He wants $23 billion next year to build the wall. We're literally spending more money on keeping people out of the country than we are rebuilding the country. And there's part of me that goes, the hell with building the wall. Just continue to let the infrastructure crumble and we'll have a third world economy that nobody will want to come here to participate in. Because that's what's happening. We're going to spend $100 billion on incentives. We're going to spend some matching money for the local and state governments to pick up the thing. And we've done this in the past. Problem is we've done it at much bigger levels. We're going to spend $50 billion on rural investment, and I'm all in favor of that. But again, they're going to use block grants to governors. So what we know what those block grants are going to be is they're going to be slush funds for governors to get reelected. You're not really going to get a lot of really great infrastructure projects out of it. It's going to be a lot of cronyism. It's going to be a lot of, hey, buddy, I need something. You need something. There you go. We can make it work. You're going to spend $20 billion on transformative projects. Having a vision towards the future. We're going to spend $20 billion. That's not a year. That's over the next decade on investing in the future. Let that just kind of sink in and tell you where the priority is. We're going to spend $2 billion a year for the next decade on the future. I'm thinking about, and look, as technology is just running roughshod over the rest of our economy, as a government looking at building infrastructure and being the ones who make sure that we get goods to products and have, a network of roads and bridges and canals and airports and you name it, $2 pathetic billion. And I know it's hard to say that. But when you're looking at the size and the scope of this budget, $4.4 trillion budget, you're talking about $2 billion? Also going to spend $20 billion on expanding a federal loan program for private activity bonds. So we're gonna make a little more incentive for the Wall Street folks to get in. Also going to spend $10 billion for capital financing funds. That's going to help build office buildings. We need more. And, of course, I'm sure Trump Towers will be looking at that. Now, you go, that's all great. That's great. We should be doing that. And I would say, yeah, we should be doing that with a couple of extra zeros on the end. Because understand, right now, as we speak, the Society of Civil Engineers had their report. Came out last year, you may remember. As we speak right now, we're $4.6 trillion in the hole right now, this minute. And it's getting worse every day. Over the next decade, that number will possibly double. And yet here we are at this moment, pennies. And really a pathetic kind of scenario. You're talking about pennies. Pennies on the dollar of what we need. And it, again, shows me that this administration doesn't have the vision, doesn't have the foresight or the interest to make sure that we can rebuild in a way that gets us not just to where we needed to be 20 years ago, but where we need to be tomorrow. One of the things that, and I've said this a bunch of times, and I'm not really a Thomas Friedman fan, but I saw him give a speech one time, and he said, he had flown from Beijing to Los Angeles. He went from Beijing airport to LAX, and he said it was like going from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. You're going from L.A., which is like the Flintstones, going to Beijing's airport, which is like the Jetsons, where everything was right to today's technology. And he said, we used to as a country. We used to push the envelope. We used to be the ones pushing the envelope, the bounds of possible, and pushing to the next technological change and being that place where innovation happens. we're not that place anymore. And if you look at this budget, he fully admits we're not that place. We're not a measly $2 billion a year for infrastructure. What about high-speed rails? Someone sent me a tweet message back going, anybody who takes public transportation in this country right now, you take your life into your own hands because it's 20 years outdated. It needs to all be revamped. We should be able to, in this time, in this space, in this country right now, we should be able to get just about anywhere using public transportation. But we haven't invested in it. Other countries have figured it out. How is it that other countries can get on a train and go 300 miles an hour? You go on a train in one of our major cities and do 80 miles an hour, you're taking your life into your own hands. And what we need to be doing is heavily investing in that. And we haven't done it. What we've done masterfully, and give us credit, pat on the back, let me do that. Pat myself on the back. Yep, there we go. We've created the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization. You look at that last tax scheme, we gave boatloads of money away, tons of it. And then, of course, we did a whole PR scheme kind of thing of, oh, hey, look, so-and-so's giving out a $500 bonus. Oh, look, you didn't get a raise, but hey, here's a Jelly of the Month club. And yet, what we've done, again, is enriched the already enriched. And what we know beyond exception is that the wealth class is going to get wealthier. And this infrastructure plan, and I hate even calling it a plan because it's really not. This scheme, this is designed solely to turn our infrastructure over to the very wealthy, with the idea that, well, they're investing in it. They're investing in our future. They're putting the money up so that they can have. So imagine toll booths everywhere. Or worse yet, the part that we don't even know. When they build it and our government has to pay rents back to them for us to use it, and we don't even know about it, that's even worse yet. And there are a couple other things that caught my eye in the budget that, just grabbed me. Evidently, we're going to have a garage sale. Evidently, there's a big garage sale coming. So get get into the sofa cushions, pull out your chains, because we're going to be selling stuff really cheap. Evidently, we're going to be selling off, a bunch of radio frequencies that are below 6 gigs, 6 gigahertz. We're going to be selling off a bunch of those. The DC Aqueduct, that's wide open. You can get your hands on that for, I'm sure a really reasonable low ball price. The Tennessee Valley Authority and some of the Western electric power plants that we've got, we're going to sell those off cheap. And better yet, here's Elon Musk. You can get a piece of the International Space Station, because evidently we're going to be auctioning off or selling off our portion of the space station. Think about that. I wonder what everybody else who chipped in on the space station is going to think about having someone like Elon Musk come on up there. Come on, we're moving in. We're moving in. Going to bring in our flamethrower. And I know you can't make light of this stuff, but this is what we're doing. And can I just remind everybody? We live in a world where 10 years ago I would have said I shouldn't have to. No one would ever have to say this. But $200 billion is not $1.5 trillion, no matter how you do the math. Sorry. And the $23 billion that they want to spend on Trump's wall, that's not infrastructure. Remember, $200 billion is not $1.5 trillion. And if you can find a place where you can turn $200 billion into $1.5 billion, let me know. Because, I don't have a lot of money, but I've got a little bit. I'm willing to gamble with those kind of returns, guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the federal government. Sign me right up. Scary, scary times. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the big infrastructure plan. I got to tell you, I think it's a horrible, horrible thing. There's very little good here, but we'll find out more about the big plan when we get back from Mara Langholz. She's a campaigner with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. Share some thoughts on just how bad this thing really is. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Oh, 90% of the wealth. 10% of the people. Oh, 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people. Oh, 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was founded. During the early years of the 20th century, the NAACP developed legal strategies to challenge anti-black violence and segregation. W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, Archibald Grimke, and Florence Kelley were just a few of the white and black intellectuals and activists who founded the organization. They sensed the urgency for a civil rights organization in the wake of the 1908 race riot in Springfield, Illinois. They hoped to combat the rapid growth of lynchings and Jim Crow statutes. Membership ballooned to almost 90,000 in less than 10 years, with more than 50 branches nationwide. These leaders opposed the gradualism of Booker T. Washington and fought to convince whites of the need for racial equality. The NAACP investigated lynchings and targeted voter disenfranchisement and segregation through a series of lawsuits. They established a legal defense fund that organized support for the Scottsboro Boys and similar cases. They undertook the campaign to overturn the separate but equal doctrine of Plessy versus Ferguson. This resulted in the 1954 landmark decision, Brown versus Board of Education. The NAACP played a central role in the civil rights movement, with Rosa Parks as its secretary. They helped to organize the Montgomery bus boycott, were centrally involved in the campaign to integrate schools in Little Rock, Arkansas, and mobilized for the 1963 March on Washington for jobs and freedom. They also worked successfully toward the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The NAACP continues its important advocacy work today with some 425,000 members.
Rebuilding America. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. So again, you look at this, just this terrible infrastructure plan, of which there isn't much there. I go back to some of the conversations we've had over the years about all of the things that need to be done. And if you look at the Society for Civil Engineers report card, it is a terrible situation. It's a situation where we have neglected funding and neglected rebuilding and caring for our infrastructure because, hey, politicians don't want to raise taxes. They want to know part of that. No, we can't do that. And you had all those years while the Republicans were whining and kicking and screaming and carrying on and doing their thing, only to find out that the walls were still crumbling down. And I guess Marie is not going to be here. Stomach bug. It's been going around. Hopefully she has the ability to go get some care, the insurance, and also a little bit of the money to get the medicine as we've seen. But anyway, I go back and I look at this. And it's such a wasted opportunity. And you go back to those years while the Republicans were kicking and screaming and carrying on about how we can't spend any more money, can't do it, no, it's bad, spending's bad, it's bad. And, you look at this, and it's highly predictable where we are. And one of the things that's really frustrating to me And look, I grew up in a place where, they just haven't, they just didn't have the money for years. And what you saw was businesses weren't coming. That old saying, if you build it, they will come. Well, if you have state-of-the-art infrastructure, if you have good roads and bridges and rail networks, and you have all of the logistic stuff there, business will come. And it's, in my view, it's the federal government's job to make sure that we as a nation have the best infrastructure in the world. And what's happened is we've gotten on this tax cut fetish. We've gotten in this world where we can't possibly raise taxes because so-and-so took a pledge. And the pledge was never under any circumstances. And if a bridge collapses like we saw in Minnesota, then you go, oh, well, we got to cut entitlements. We got to go after those kids and their food stamps. And we've got to cut, all of the investments for the future and all of the things that, are supposed to help poor people, those are the first to get chopped. And this budget does that. This budget goes after Medicare and Medicaid. And again, this was a guy who said, well, I'm not going to do it. Well, guess what? He did it. And what's frustrating, and I keep coming back to this, for a couple of decades now, we've been here on this show saying, look, if we don't do this now, it's only going to get worse. If we don't do it today, if we don't fix it now, it's only going to get worse. When we started saying this, our get even number was around a little over $1 trillion. We are now up to where the American Society of Civil Engineers is saying 4.6 trillion right now. And if we continue to kick this can down the road as this does, it only gets worse. It only gets more expensive. And I go back to the Obama years. This is the thing that really infuriates me. Because this has all become so politicized. It's all so political. During the Obama years, if you remember the Great Recession, what should have happened, and no one held the Republican Party accountable for this, what should have happened is we should have had a massive stimulus plan. We had a little one. It was okay. The problem was half of that stimulus was tax cuts. We should have taken that money and said, you know what? We are going to interject demand into the economy. We are, and look, and Obama tried. To his credit, he tried. He tried to say, hey, let's get those shovel-ready projects moving. Let's get some other ones in the pipeline. Let's start getting people back to work. Let's start tearing things down, rebuilding stuff. You remember the Cash for Cockers thing that they tried to try and get people, to create jobs to help, seniors in their homes, to insulate and save energy and all of that. They tried. There were tons of great ideas that had we funded, had we said this is a priority, we should be doing this, we need to rebuild for the future. Had they done that, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in right now. Had they, when interest rates, and I'm not making this up for people with very short-term memory. Those of us who suffer from amnesia, I'm not making this up. You can look it up. Countries were giving us money at negative rates. They were basically paying us to take their money so that it wouldn't deflate anymore. We could have gotten money at negative interest rates to rebuild our infrastructure, and we couldn't do it because the Republicans wouldn't allow it. No, they said, we need austerity. We need to tighten the belt. Times are tough. The debt is bad. Debt is bad. Tighten the belt. Tighten the belt. Urgh. And what do we end up with? We end up where we are right now, where we've got a handful of magic beans, and they happen to be orange, or let's say magic oranges. And those magic oranges are supposed to bring us infrastructure. And yet, here again, We know nothing is going to get done. And what does get done is going to be politically motivated. And I go back to maybe Trump's parade is a great idea. Maybe Trump's parade is the greatest idea ever to happen in this country. Because I've always said, and I truly believe the only time we really do anything in this country is if it's for the military. So maybe if while, tanking down, Pennsylvania Avenue, one gets swallowed up by a sinkhole, causes massive damage. Maybe we have them all over the country and a bunch of them get swallowed up. Maybe then, and only then, do we have the ability to, say, hey, we need to rebuild our infrastructure. Because if you remember, if you go back to the Eisenhower years, Eisenhower's rationale for a major interstate project like we had, because it was an enormous project. It was tons of money. It was a massive, massive project to connect this country. And there's no way you could have done it by saying, well, it's good for, businesses to be able to get products, services. People will be able to go state to state. It'll improve travel times. It'll be good for us that way. No, he sold it as it's how we can move bombs. We can move bombs all around this country. We can have mile-long stretches for airplanes to land in times of war. And we said, okay, yeah, you're right. We need to be able to have planes that can land on the highway. Although I got to tell you, I don't remember the last time a jet, a military jet landed on a highway. I'm sure it's happened. I just don't ever remember it. And I don't remember the last time I saw massive nuclear weapons riding around on the highways. But I'm sure it's happened. Maybe what we need is hey, we got to get our bombs around. And the infrastructure's too bad. It's just we need to have automated bomb movers. Maybe that's how we move to the future. Maybe that's how we begin to think about what's the future of this country going to look like. Because I'll tell you right now, the visionless leaders that we have right now, the people who are controlling the Republican Party right now, really? We're going to put our future in the hands of these dimwits? The people who said, hey, we're going broke, deficits, debt. And then when they get into power, they go and they give a whole boatload of money away. And while we're at it, let's go back to the Bush years. Remember? Do you remember the time when Alan Greenspan said, we have no idea what the future looks like because we're going to be debt free? You remember when he opined of how dangerous it could be for the country to be debt free? Well, we never had to worry about that because George W. Bush came in and made sure that didn't happen. And then, of course, his and Clinton's recession, which was, in my view, a depression for most people, wiped out any chance of us ever being debt free. And then every economic battle of the 8 years that Obama was in office, the Republicans gridlocked, delayed, stalled, strangled every opportunity for us to move forward. And it's infuriating because we've missed opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. We've missed every chance. And I go back to 2009, 2010, where we could have borrowed huge amounts of money at virtually no cost and rebuild our infrastructure, put people back to work, get the economy really steaming along years before we got out of this mess. But again, our Republican friends said, nope, not going to do it. And now that they're in charge, now they want to stimulate the economy. But they're not even really doing it because every one of the things that they've done to quote unquote stimulate the economy is doing nothing but destroying the economy. We're giving more money to people who are not going to spend it. We know that to be the case. And what we also know is it's not going to trickle down to the rest of us. Sorry, not going to happen. We know this. We know beyond exception. But yet, what do? The same thing that we've always done when Republicans take power. They borrow a ton of money. I always love the conservatives say, you're a borrow and spend liberal. Or you're a tax and spend liberal. And I go, yeah, I am. I believe in raising taxes on the very wealthy to pay for the things we need, like roads and bridges and education and healthcare, and you name it. You love the military so much, let's pay for it. I am a tax and spend liberal. I wear that proudly. Problem is we have conservatives who are the borrow and squander types. They're going to borrow a ton of money, and they're going to squander it on the worst possible options, which is giving the wealthy more money to not invest in infrastructure, roads or bridges or jobs here. And we know that. And yet, here we are, right back, doing the same dumb things. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Our good friend Bob Day going to be here. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day that the labor leader known as Mother Jones was arrested in West Virginia. She was there to support coal miners during the Paint and Cabin Creek strike of 1912-1913. The West Virginia coal fields were one of the bloodiest sites of labor conflict in U.S. history. The bosses had evicted the striking workers from their company homes. As a result, the strikers lived in tent camps under dire conditions. 83-year-old Mother Jones visited these camps where she gave fiery speeches. In the fall, she organized a march of the miners' children through the streets of Charleston, West Virginia. Authorities saw Mother Jones as a troublemaker and wanted to expel her from their state. On February 7th, guards hired by the bosses attacked one of the miner camps with a machine gun mounted on an armored train. One striker died. The workers responded with an attack of their own, thus giving the governor the excuse to declare martial law. Mother Jones was arrested and put on trial for murder at a military court. The basis for her arrest was a speech she had given 3 months earlier. Mother Jones refused to recognize the authority of the trial, writing in her autobiography that my arrest and trial were unconstitutional. She was convicted and sentenced to 20 years. It was during this trial that Mother Jones was called the most dangerous woman in America. The sentence of this well-known labor leader spurred national outrage. The United States Senate ordered an investigation into the conditions of the West Virginia coal mines. West Virginians elected a new governor who released the beloved Mother Jones. Upon her release, she continued fighting for workers until the day she died at 100 years old. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show. The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What a weird day today in the Senate. Some crazy stuff going on there. Just a bizarre day all around. The budget coming out, or not really the budget. This is Trump's priority budget. It's not going anywhere. But it's still an interesting and bizarre day. And here to fill in some of the holes and fill us in on what's going on, our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So, interesting day in the Senate. What's going on?
Yes, there's a ton of things going on, but the article that jumped out at me this morning, and the inside baseball name is King and Queen of the Hill, is what they call it, basically. And that happened once in a while in the House, where they would say, okay, anybody that introduces bills on the same topic, maybe you'll have 4 bills, they'll bring all 4, whichever bill either gets the vote first to pass, that's it, the other 3 die, or they vote on all of them, whichever gets the most votes. Even if one passes, if another one gets more votes, it becomes the measure, all right? So basically, what Mitch McConnell did this morning, it has shocked me, is when he said, all right, his staffer quoted that Mitch was saying, put on your big boy panties and your big girl panties and go, is what they said. So now it's any amendment, all the amendments you want on immigration, whoever gets to 60 votes, whoever comes up with the bill gets to 60 votes, that's going to go into the shell of a bill that the House had, it's now empty, thrown to the House, and that should be about it. I find it fascinating. This is one I'm going to watch. Something's probably going to come out. And I will say with McConnell, Rick, and you know this, how politics runs in the state legislatures and the Congress, there's a big issue, and finally some leader says, okay, all right, here you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Here's the rope.
So
Hang yourself.
And if they don't get something, they, meaning R's and D's, because supposedly there are Republicans, some that want this, if they don't get something, what are they going to do? We want to vote? They're going to get one.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's here's enough rope. Go ahead. Hang yourself.
Right. It'll be interesting to see what comes out. Then, of course, because really President Trump can't weigh in on this because there are going to be, can you imagine how many amendments are going to be to this bill? There's unlimited amendments. Can you imagine what they're going to do? How many?
Yeah, it's if you want chaos, if you want just if you want to deflect the issue, I think this is a good way to go.
Sure. And then the other big issue of the day, of course, was the on a policy was the budget. Now, I've been trying to explain. Ellen Ratner and I, Rick, had this call to each other because Ellen's seasoned, she's been around, but it was so confusing, and it was confusing for me to kind of reach back, in the old congressional hat. But what they're doing is they should have passed September the 30th, effective October the 1st, 2017, would have been the fiscal year 2018 budget.
Right.
So now, by March 23rd, they're working on the 2018 budget, and the 2019 budget is due by the 1st of October for fiscal year 2019. Have you followed me on that?
Yeah, they've fallen behind on their homework. It's catch-up time.
They're all over the place. So now on top of it is the president's budget, which has 1.5. Oh, let me save the transportation for last, because you're the transportation guru. But there's some reductions in there, and Medicare, some cuts, environmental. We don't know, everything that's in there yet. But I will tell you this: the revenues are irrelevant. They're going to dip 3.7 trillion over the life of the bill. It's a 1-year bill, but it's a 10-year outlook on revenue. So it'd be like you and I saying, we're going to buy that great big Chevy truck that we can't afford, but we know in 7 years our pay is going to double. Yeah. That's what they're doing here.
No, it's the rosiest of glasses they put on.
This is so fiscally out of control that I don't even know where to begin. So the other issue is 1.5 trillion for transportation. Actually, it's not there, but there's 1.5 trillion.
Yeah, I don't know how you get to the 1 point. I don't know what magic pixie dust they're using to get to 1.5 trillion, because it's only really 200 billion. And wherever they're getting that from, wherever they're getting a return of 1 to 7.5, let me know so I can put my money in, let my money work there as well.
Well, let's look at the 18th district I represented I was there for 2 transportation bills, right? My take on part of it was $58 million in the transportation budget, right, to take it to the states and do projects, right, with state and local. Now, if you think about it, and I wasn't the only one that got that kind of money, if you think about the $200 billion, if that's the pot from the Fed, divided by 535 members, is that what, $460,000 each, which would build what, an alleyway somewhere? So the math is not there. Now, I know what they're saying. You know how highway projects work. You know transportation. You know the road system of our country better than anybody. So what happens is a highway takes 5, 10, 5 is optimistic, 15, 20 years of engineering and local money, et cetera. So the Trump administration is saying we are going to squeeze and reduce regulatory nonsense, blah, 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 from the feds. And we can do that 20-year project now. We can do it in 2. we can do that 10-year project in 2 years. So the theory goes where the people would have spent so much for a 20-year project, they're only going to have to spend it for 2-year project, the state or the locals, and they've got more money to spend. Now, you know they're not going to do the project in 2 years, and I know they're not. So I can't do the math on the 1.5 million. I can't imagine how it gets there.
The 1.5 trillion.
Trillion, I mean.
Yeah, I have no idea how you get there either. But again,
Trillion.
you know, it's one of these things where they throw these things out, and it's the most rosy predictions. It's the, you know, the best outlooks. And, you know, as I tweeted out this morning, you know, this is all great, fine, well, and good on paper, but wait till the Trump recession hits, and all of this stuff triples. And all of the debts and all of the deficits, and, you know, where are the fiscally responsible Republicans that I depend on to keep us somewhere near the sane line? Have they completely abandoned their principles?
Well, Jim Jordan of Ohio, who's head of the Freedom Caucus, came out swinging at the speaker today. Look, Paul Ryan has been the biggest, you know, deficit hawk that's existed. John Kasich was chairman of the Budget Committee. Ryan sort of picked up the mantra, right? When Obama was president, Ryan would complain about the debt ceilings, et cetera. Now he's the speaker. And the problem he's going to have, though, is that, you know, he can debate provisions of budgets, but eventually, especially for the Republicans who have lived on this type of deficit, Rick, just is not going to cut it with the average base. It's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't now argue Keynesian economics when for, you know, 8 years you were screaming and hollering that, no, we need austerity. It just doesn't work. And if you really wanted $1.5 trillion for infrastructure, there was a great place to get it before you gave it away. Mm-hmm. Just kind of saying.
Well, and also the gas tax was raised in 1993, I think was the last time it was raised. That's not even, you know, going to be considered. So I'm just not sure where the revenue would come from.
Crazy. Evidently, we've named a new drug czar. We got a new drug czar. I guess Marino's long gone. Who's the new guy?
I'm having a senior moment.
Jim Carroll.
I can't remember. Carroll. I said Collins. I was close. Marino's gone because he had this legislation that was really going to proliferate opioids, so you know he got in trouble. And now Carroll, who was the deputy to Kelly, the chief of staff, they're moving him from the White House over. I don't know that Carroll has a problem, you know, of fitting into the job as Marino did, but it's just kind of amazing they took somebody from the White House because there's very few people that have been left. So, you know, I think that was a move to try to ensure they can fill that position. That position sat quite a long time. Of course, with the opioid crisis and things going on, it's got to be filled.
Yeah, and I argue they don't really care about the position because if you look at the last budget Trump came out with, like 95% of the funding that was the federal response to the opioid crisis, they'd slashed away.
Well, you know, I've always been skeptical, honestly, my entire time there, and even looking now at the czar concept. I can't even remember when that started. I don't know if it was under Bush, but, you know, this whole czar concept. And, yeah, I know you can have an out front face that can support things, but in a lot of cases, these people come in, honestly, Rick, and nobody ever, you know, they don't move something. Nobody even knows what they're doing.
The first person I remember was the car czar. And that was obviously under Obama. And I don't remember who the first czar before that was.
I think there was a drug czar maybe, or a defense czar. I can't remember, or an economic czar under Bush. You're right. There was the car czar. So
see, but I just don't say. I remember it, and it's just, again, you know, like you, I'm kind of having a moment. But I remember it being something highly negative that was thrown at them. It wasn't, you know, we're gonna have a czar, because it harkens you back to the Russian thing, and I don't know, I don't think we were ready for that, but you know, here we are.
I never liked it.
Never liked it a bit, and I still don't. I think it's dumb. But since you brought up Kelly a moment ago, what's going on with Kelly and this whole wife beater thing, and what's going on with the White House with this wife beater thing?
You know, this was a very. These are always bad moments for anybody if something like this gets revealed, but this was pretty simple. He was either fired or he resigned. One of the two, all right? They either knew or they didn't. He either lied to them or he didn't. Now, there are now multiple stories. So what has happened here, and including, let's start with the president, because there's a lot of stories about how he is appalled privately, and these are, sources that are good that are coming out of the White House.
Not buying it.
He's, well, you really?
No, I'm not buying that he's outraged. I'm buying that he's outraged that someone got caught. I'm buying that he's outraged that this has caused distraction from him. But I'm not buying that he cares that some guy beat his wife. I don't buy that at all.
So you think it's a brand? Branding.
Look, I mean, you go back and you look at all the other people that he's defended that have beaten people, and you just go, it just seems like a pattern. I mean, he defended Mike Tyson for the love of Haven.
But even if, okay, let's say that he didn't say it. I don't see why he'd want to come out and say one thing so different publicly, and then they leak this privately. So it's two different things, which makes you say, what on earth? And then Kelly is now basically on record with two different things, because Mulvaney, the cabinet member, went on TV Sunday and said something completely that contradicted him. So there's so many fingers in this soup. So what they did is they took a bad situation, which would be handled by, you're fired or you resign, one of the two, and we discovered this and we did this. And then they took that, which would have been a bad story for a day, and they have now created who did what and knew when and how.
Yep.
Now they have thrown gasoline on the story.
Now, as I said on Friday, it was a bad situation, and someone said, can't get any worse, and Trump goes, hold my Coke, I'll get to it. And he's done just that. I mean, and there's part of me that goes, it's part of the distraction. It's part of the, hey, look over here, while all the other stuff is going on.
Correct.
I just, look, there's no defense for a wife beater. And here's the problem. This is my problem with this whole administration. This is stuff that should have been vetted out before this guy became part of the White House, before he became part of the administration. This is you're the guy who's been in government a long time. Isn't this why you do background checks?
Yeah, and now that part I don't understand, Rick. Was there a background check?
Don't know. Look, there are evidently 30 people who have security clearances who their backgrounds aren't done yet. I think these people came in. They had no concern about how things were done in the past. We're going to break every rule. We're going to do it our way. And they just threw people into positions without thinking about anything. So this is what we got.
I must say, having worked with two different White Houses, one Democrat, one Republican, if you look at the chiefs of staff of Clinton and then Bush twice and then Rahm Emanuel, who wasn't the highest on people's list, but if you look at how they ran the office, they made the trains run and the phones answer,
And they protected the president from stupid stuff like this.
Right, exactly.
We'll see. And finally, why I had to agree with Joe Walsh this morning. He is saying, the White House released the Republican memo. Why not the Democratic memo? I agree. Why haven't we released the Democratic memo yet?
I watched this story to see the response of Schiff, who Schiff said, I'm disappointed. At this point in time, I haven't rechecked the stories, but I didn't see this complete war between the White House. So I don't know if there's some technical things. I always did think, frankly, the Democratic side should have not had a motion to release their memo simultaneously, but to release it minutes after the Republican. So one went to the White House. The second trailed it right away.
Agreed.
I always feel that should have happened. They gave the Republicans an excuse when they wanted to simultaneously release them, because it's almost like, here's two memos and you got to. But I think the one should have went right after. It would have put them in a quite a big box.
I agree. But again, I hate agreeing with Joe Walsh. But Bob, I appreciate the time. Great stuff, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
Always great talking to our friend Bob Ney. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1880. Labor leader John L. Lewis was born in a company mining town outside of Lucas, Iowa. His father was a Welsh coal miner, and young Lewis followed in his footsteps, entering the Big Hill mine in Lucas at the age of 17. He became a union leader and served as the president of the United Mine Workers of America from 1920 to 1960. Under his leadership, the United Mine Workers became one of the leading unions in the nation. Lewis was an aggressive fighter and strike leader who gained higher wages for his membership while steamrolling his opponents. A thunderous speaker, Time magazine once referred to him as the Lion of the labor movement. In 1935, Lewis and 8 other leaders formed the Committee for Industrial Relations within the American Federation of Labor. Lewis believed it was essential to the future of the labor movement to organize steelworkers. This put the committee at odds with the craft union-dominated AFL. The disagreement eventually led to the CIO splitting from the AFL. The CIO helped establish the United Steelworkers of America and helped organize millions of other industrial workers in the 1930s. Lewis played a major role in helping President Franklin Delano Roosevelt win a landslide re-election in 1936. During World War II, most unions took a no-strike pledge. Lewis was never one to let public opinion get in the way of what he thought was right. He led several strikes during the war, causing public outrage. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson awarded Lewis the Presidential Medal of Freedom. John L. Lewis is most often remembered for the quote, "The workers of the nation were tired of waiting for the corporate industry to right their economic wrongs, to alleviate their social agony, and to grant them their political rights. Despairing of fair treatment, they resolved to do something for themselves." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
For a change. The Rick Smith Show.
Today is new, and everyone is waiting on you.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Sandy sent me an email during the break saying you're both wrong. The title of rulers or emperors of Russia from the 16th century until the Russian Revolution were known as czars. Also, officials with certain high-level titles in the U.S. and United Kingdoms, they are also considered political czars who run and organize governmental departments. And they are to devote their expertise in a single area of work, going all the way back to FDR and his food czar. I did not know that. Thank you. Sandy also points out that LBJ appointed Sergeant Shriver as the anti-poverty czar and the director of the Office of Economic Opportunity. Also, virtually every president since Nixon has had a drug czar, with the exception of Jimmy Carter, who had an energy czar. So Sandy finishes it up. I don't like the title either. And I don't. We couldn't think of something more original. Just a thought. Anyway, a new survey out by the good folks at Morgan Stanley. And I hate calling bankers or financial people good people, but I'm gonna go there now. New survey out: 13% of the company's savings from the new tax laws are going to go to workers. And I would argue that's probably right around what I thought. They're saying 13% of all of the heist out of the tax bill are going to go to workers in the form of bonuses, maybe a small pay raise, or Jelly of the Month Club, whichever. 43% they say are going to end up in the hands of investors, either through stock buybacks or dividends. The rest will probably go to either CEOs or some modest improvements, or, you know what, overseas. Because, hey, we've got a territorial tax now. They shouldn't be harmed. Now, the White House is saying that 300 companies in the U.S., covering about 3.5 million people, have seen raises. They've gotten bonuses. Their lives are getting better. Now, granted, it's not the $4,000 that they promised last year, but okay. Now, understand, 3.5 million people sounds like a lot of people. We have a workforce of almost 126 million. So the other 123 million, zip, nothing, nada, nothing for you. But hey, it's a good talking point. They gave some money away. Now, according to Morgan Stanley, they predict that the manufacturing companies are only going to allocate 9% of their tax savings to their workforce. The rest of it will obviously go into their pockets. Now, here's the thing. Most economists, according to CNN, say that it could be great. This could be great. You could see higher wages. You could see companies investing in better plants and equipment. You could see them, really, spending all that money and plowing it back into the economy. And then you could see pigs fly too. That could happen. You just know what it is. Also in the news, Amazon is laying off hundreds of its employees at its Seattle headquarters and around the world. Now they're saying, don't get upset. It's not a huge retooling because we have 500,000 workers across the world, and we have like 12,500 job openings on various job sites. Still, kind of makes you wonder, seeing them go the way of the side. And finally, for this hour, good news coming on the campaign front, and good on Randy Bryce, who we've had here on the program. His campaign against Paul Ryan, they have run what I think is a fantastic strategic digital campaign. They have signed on with the Campaign Workers Guild to give their staff workers a voice on the job. Because look, anybody who's ever worked on a campaign knows that it's a bunch of young people who are working 100 hours a week for poverty wages just so they can have put something on a resume and maybe get a patronage job down the road. Maybe. Right now, what Randy Bryce's campaign is signed on to, and a couple of House races, and I think one governor's race, is they're going to sign on to giving those workers some bit of rights, not working them 1,000 hours a week and not paying starvation wages. According to the report, Bryce's campaign is going to give people a little bit of paid time off. They're going to earn at least $3,000 a month, and they're going to have a process to report sexual harassment. They're going to get a monthly health insurance reimbursement of up to $500. I think this is a good thing. And I've been saying for a very long time that, we need to have some bit of say in what happens in these campaigns. Because what happens is you got the candidate who's like a king or a god. And, they just abuse the heck out of people. And there's really nothing these folks can do about it because they're at will. It's a short-term gig. And, it's just out the door. I've said for a very long time that there should be some law that puts a floor at what you can do with those temporary staff people, or they should organize. So to me, this is a start. And anybody who knows anything about me, I believe that it doesn't matter what you do for a living. You should have the right to have a voice on the job. You should have the protections of not being abused or sexually harassed or any of that. You should have the right to a union on the job. And I don't care what it is. And for me, this is one of those areas that across the board, it should happen. Now, according to Josh Idelson, who wrote the article, he reached out to both the Democratic congressional campaign committees and the Republican congressional campaign committees to see what their responses were. No response. Now, the Democrats should be coming around to this by saying, look, we stand with labor, we stand with workers, and we're gonna walk the walk, talk the talk, do whatever, however you want to frame that. The Republicans are going to, show people we don't care about our staff people, and we're going to use and abuse who we can. Now, on the Republican side, what will happen is you'll still get people who want to be used and abused because they want to get into the Koch brothers' pockets. They want to get into those cushy gigs in think tanks or AstroTurf groups, so they'll put up with it. And for me, this is where there's got to be that leveling. There's got to be that floor under your feet that says, you know what, you can only abuse me so much. That's it. Not going to allow you to abuse me any more than so. Just a little bit, but no more. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. For those listening on stations that only pick up the first hour, feel free to head on over to thericksmithshow.com and check out hour number 2. For everyone else, quick break, right back with Propane Jane. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
She's a prehistoric ages, and the days of ancient Greece, right down to the Middle Ages. Planet Earth kept going through changes, and then the Renaissance came, and times continue to change. Nothing stayed the same, but there were always renegades.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Omarosa back in the news again. And look, this celebrity Big Brother thing, an amazing platform for her. I give her credit. She knows how to promote herself and to make sure that her name does not go away. Evidently, in the latest episode of the Celebrity Big Brother, which I have to admit, I have never watched. I don't watch reality. I never watched the Survivor or the Eat This Thing or that thing. I never watched any of those. But reportedly, what has happened is she was talking about her job during the Clinton years and also during the Trump years, because I guess during the Clinton years, she was one of the people who put political appointees into place and made sure all their paperwork was done and made sure that they were vetted. And she talks about how you talk to these people and they'd all lie. You know, they'd never done anything wrong. And then you get the FBI report back and they'd have DUIs and they'd have all these things. The quote that's getting a lot of attention is she said, there are some bizarre things that people have. They lie. Everybody lies. They lie about everything on their background thinking it won't be found. Then you get the folders, everything from DUI, speeding, domestic violence. Oh my God, some of the most accomplished people have domestic violence stuff. You know, aggression. It's the craziest thing. And you go, did she know what was going on in the White House? Did someone sneak that to her? It just seems very convenient. Anyway, let's get some thoughts on the latest insanity coming out of instability in chief and the White House. Our good friend Propane Jane. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So is she not like the greatest self-promoter ever? Is she like the female version of Don King?
I mean, and she's like the Energizer Bunny. She just keeps going. I mean, nothing can get her down.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm still not sure if she got fired or quit or, you know, just left one day and they changed all the locks. I don't know.
She had to be escorted out by security.
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, there's almost nothing I believe that comes out of this administration.
I mean, in their world, there's no bad press. I mean, you know, as long as their mouths are moving, to them, it's a good thing.
As long as someone remembers their name. But what about this? Because I wanted to get your thought on this. Because, you know, what she's saying, what I'm gathering from her statement is that you have these successful, aggressive, alpha male kind of people who have just these horrible things in their background. Mm-hmm. Is that just successful people? I mean, because I like to think of myself as sort of an alpha male. I don't put up with much, but, you know, I would never hit a woman. So I'm struggling with her position.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like what she's trying to say is that, I mean, I agree with you that she's sort of setting it up like, oh my gosh, we just had no idea that this is something in this person's background, and, you know, we haven't been able to check everything, and, you know, we're just as surprised as everybody else is about this. But then at the same time, she's also sort of admitting to that people in this, like, circle, in this bubble, are sort of, I guess, predisposed to behaving in inappropriate ways. Or even so, also, you know, what I also hear people saying is, you know, because they're in this position of power, that women are just, you know, coming out of the woodworks to lie about them. You know, and this is sort of Trump's line as well, you know, that woe is the abuser, that people are just sort of making up these things about them because they are such a, you know, high-profile person. So I think that this is, she doth protest too much again, like everyone else in the administration does, because at the helm of everything is Trump. You know, grab him by the, you know what?
Yep.
Trump.
I mean, there's part of me that goes, you know, that's question number 2 on the form.
Right.
You know, question one being, do you have any idea what it is the job entails? No, you're hired. Number two, have you ever beaten your wife? Yes, you're hired.
I mean, but you know, I think that what's so salient about this whole situation is that this is not the first time that Trump or someone that he is associated with is accused of crimes against women. If you go back to just a couple of months ago, I mean, he was wholeheartedly endorsing Roy Moore.
Yep.
And there were, you know, I can't even keep count of how many women eventually came out to say that they had been, you know, sexually assaulted in some way by him.
Yeah, and you could go back to during the campaign, one of his campaign flack. Corey Lewandowski. If you remember, he was grabbed the one woman and basically almost threw her to the ground. And the next day, he was accused of battery. And the next day, you had him you had Trump on, I think it was Good Morning America or something. Say, no, he's a good person. He's a fine person. You're going to destroy a good family man.
Right, exactly. And in so many ways, I mean, what I hear, you know, because ultimately Trump is really just in it for himself. I mean, we all know that at this point. And so when Trump is making these, like, you know, heartfelt, defenses of these people, he really is talking about himself. It's like a projection, or even a displacement, you know, and he's sort of saying, you know, I'm this person. I mean, I've been accused of this same thing. And you can actually hear so much empathy in what he's talking about. And of course, he should be able to understand that position because in his lifetime, of course, he's been accused of so many things. I mean, we're in the midst of this whole Stormy Daniels thing.
Yeah.
And so I think in a lot of ways, when he's speaking up for these men that have been accused of very, you know, inappropriate, atrocious things, for him to actually, again, continue to dismiss the victims out of hand, that's really just along the same lines of what he's been doing in his own life.
Right. Now, going back to her statement on, you know, it's these successful men and who are just aggressive. There's this thought, and I got to think Trump, you know, thinks along this way of, you know, I'm entitled to all of this stuff. So, you know, whatever I want or whatever, you know, we want. I think back he was defending Roger Ailes. Mm-hmm. And you know, Roger Ailes is a good guy and he's a good person, and that you got a couple of women who are complaining, but he did really good for them. So basically, they should just shut up and be happy about it.
Right, exactly.
Is it a sense of entitlement, do you think? I mean, is there something psychological? Is there something mental that you as a brain doctor can tell me? You know, or is this just, you know what, you've got a bunch of snots who are doing snotty things?
Well, I think it's probably both. And, you know, as I always talk about, narcissism and sociopathy, here they go again, right? And what we know statistically is that, yes, again, Omarosa is in some ways correct, that in the field of business and in politics, there is a preponderance of people who have narcissistic traits, and also sociopathic traits. And so, yes, there are sort of these alpha male types, as you say. And yes, in a lot of situations, whether it be their business of choice, they can be aggressive. And in some ways that works for them and it's very productive and they actually are successful because they are aggressive. And what we're seeing more and more with this Me Too movement, and all of these, you know, revelations, coming to the fore in regards to sexual harassment is that there is a mentality among these men that they are entitled. If you go back to the Access Hollywood tape and you just, you know, replay in your mind Donald Trump saying what he was saying about, you know, this unassuming woman who he just, you know, walks upon and violates and grabs her by the pee because she wants it. She doesn't even know she wants it. But he can just do that because, you know, when you're a star, you get away with it.
And you could buy her some furniture and she'd be happy.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, you know, when we're looking into the entertainment industry, and the stories that are coming out, that in a lot of ways those men felt like, okay, well, this woman wants something from me, and I'm going to give her a job or, a promotion or some opportunity that she otherwise wouldn't have had because, she is giving me this thing that she, of course, wants to give me, and that's sort of an equal trade-off. And so I do think that in a lot of ways, what he's saying when he says, well, this is a good family man, that's sort of like the classic abuser excuse. Well, okay, he provides, he goes, he works a job, he provides for the family, there's food on the table, so what if he smacks you around? You have a roof over your head. And so that very authoritarian, abusive mindset is what you hear in his defense, and I think that is very pathological, and it is something that we know to be associated with narcissists and sociopaths.
But the thing is Jane, is that none of this stuff is new. I mean, especially when you're talking about Hollywood. I mean, the casting couch has been something we've known about forever,
right?
And it's always been one of those things that And again, I go back to I'm a large guy. I'm a large white guy. I don't understand how you don't just stand up and go, the hell with you, I'm walking out of here, or something.
Right.
I don't understand that kind of dynamic. So how do you make sure that doesn't? Because now is a great moment. That you're going to correct some of this, but does it really change down the road once all of the fervor blows over and once maybe Trump's out of the White House? Does this change?
Well, I mean, I think like we've been talking about for the last couple of months at this point, what is happening in response to all of this misogyny and this just very abusive treatment of women, and how much kind of condoning of that culture and patriarchy is going on right now is actually, I think, invigorating the resistance,
right.
And it's actually making women more interested in running for office, and women are running for office at unprecedented levels right now.
And I've been saying for years we need more women in office because maybe we'll be a better society. At least we can hope. Or maybe women just turn into men and we're all bad.
Well, I mean, I think one thing is for certain that if you're talking about issues that pertain to the safety of women and children, and again, like you just said, being a man, it's sort of easy to think about, okay, well, if I'm in this, situation where I feel threatened, I can just get up and walk out, or I can punch the guy in the face. And women and children are typically at a disadvantage in that, the man in their life is, probably bigger than, both of the woman and her children. And so they don't necessarily feel physically able to meet that threat.
Yeah, but they got to go to sleep sometime.
Yeah, I mean, they do. But again, I mean, what do we see? How does the law look at, does the law stand on the side of women and children who are abused and who actually do act in self-defense? I mean, we actually see where, women are serving, lifetime sentences in prison for, killing their abuser.
Yeah, but he won't hit anybody again.
He won't, right? But then that woman has to go to prison for the rest of her life. And even in what we see in most situations is that maybe it doesn't actually get to that point where, there's actually been a murder involved, but that woman doesn't even have sort of the benefit of the doubt. Look at this situation with Porter in the White House. I mean, there's photos of both of the women with black eyes. And there's still people, mostly in the right-wing news media, that are like, well, can we really believe this?
She could have walked into a door.
Yeah, I mean, she could have, and so there's still this attitude of, of course you're going to believe the guy over this woman. And so, while Trump is sort of talking about family man and, these people's lives and their careers are ruined, I mean, just as a woman, I've thought about over the last couple of days that I've seen these photos of these women just being splashed over the media. I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, like I don't even post photos of myself on Instagram without makeup. I mean, I can't imagine for the whole world to see over and over and over again me with a black eye. And then people still not believing me on top of that. But this is the society that we live in, where, you know, we coddle and we glorify the abuser, and we actually vilify the people who are the abused.
What do you say to the person who throws out the, you know, this conquering mentality? This, you know, women are to be pursued. You know, it goes back to the days of the cave, and you're never going to change it, Jane. It's never going to happen.
I mean, I think that's just very fortunate for the people who believe that way. I mean, it's very American Taliban-ish, as I like to call them. I mean, this is what we allegedly went over to the Middle East to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan.
No, we went there for oil.
Well, I said allegedly, right? We allegedly went over there because it was atrocious for men to still be thinking that way. And to this day, we are turning our noses up at Saudi Arabia and most of the Arab world because, you know, women there are not driving or they're covering their heads, right? But then in some ways, this is exactly what the conservatives are saying when they have that same mentality.
No, it's the 1950s mentality that it's a family issue. Stay out of it.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think that the problem is and is going to continue to be that these family issues that everyone needs to stay out of are continuing to be in the spotlight because this is the type of dysfunction that runs rampant in the Trump family, and therefore this is the type of dysfunction that he continues to surround himself with. And so he is around people who are belligerent. He is around people who are, jerks, so to speak. If you think back to Scaramucci, you know, I can only imagine that if I went back in Scaramucci's history, you know, there's probably all kinds of, you know, he cussed somebody out and, you know, he flipped somebody off. And, you know, yes, as Omarosa is saying, I mean, these are the types of people you actually have to be that way to be in Trump's inner circle.
Yeah, but I've told people off and I've told people where to go. And I don't think I'm a horrible human being.
Well, of course you don't, right? But what about the person who was on the other end of it?
Well, they deserved it.
Well, of course. I mean, in your mind, they did, right? But the abuser typically has an excuse for why the person they're abusing deserved the abuse that they got. And there's always two sides of that coin. And I think that, yes, there are people who, you know, believe that way and think that that's just and that's just the way it's supposed to be. But there's also a whole hell of a lot of people that don't believe that way.
You've never had a road rage incident where you got mad at somebody who cut you off?
I mean, I've gotten mad, but I certainly haven't. Like one of my patients told me last week, actually, you know, Doc, I actually almost pulled a woman out of her car.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
She's never done that.
And then she reveals to me that, like, she's had multiple times where she's, you know, literally almost gotten to fisticuffs.
It's a woman who did this?
Yes, this is a woman. And so, yes, I believe it. I know that people get to that level. And most certainly she felt justified in that moment. But at the same time, she was in my office like, hey, we need to do something with my medication or, you know, something. I can't, I can't go like this. This is actually not okay.
Wow.
And I think that's the problem that you see when you're talking about someone like Trump is just the outright refusal and just, you know, inability to see the impact that his actions has on other people and how other people are actually traumatized or feel abused by what he's doing. He just completely disregards that out of hand.
Yeah. So you're hopeful though. You think maybe this is going to move in the right direction and we're going to be okay.
I mean, I think the more horrible he gets, the more invigorated we are going to continue to be to get him and everybody who put him there out of there.
There you go. Last question I've got for you, a completely different topic.
Yeah.
Today was the big unveiling of the big portraits of President Obama and the First Lady. Thoughts?
You know what? I actually really loved President Obama's. I actually liked the flowers, but I did see the sort of spoofs of it, and like the Simpsons backing away into the bushes,
Or at Wrigley Field.
But as always, I think they're beautiful, and I miss them. I miss them tremendously.
Yeah, I wish they were back there, but not a problem with the muted gray of Michelle.
No, that was problematic. I was just about to say I was going to move on to her next. I think that they got her tone completely wrong. But aside from that, I thought her dress was beautiful. And I think they were both very gracious at the unveiling, as they always were. And they are just the epitome of style and grace and dignity.
Yeah.
And I miss them both very much.
Yeah, that makes two of us. But here's the thing: are you surprised that the right wing is actually trying to smear evidently Tucker Carlson called the painter a woman, and just all kinds of this right wing smear stuff going on? Are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not. I mean, this is what they do. They're going to throw as much mud as they can at the wall. They're going to be basically as racist as they can at this point, because they feel they have a free pass to do it. And they're going to let those dog whistles go every single day. And a day like today, even with this portrait, they're going to find something to make hay of. So,
yeah, personally, I didn't understand it.
No, of course not.
I didn't understand the paintings and the meanings behind it. And I'm always one of those believers. If you have to explain it to me, it's over my head. I'm lost.
Well, see, that's all art to me.
When you had to explain that there were flowers from every place where Obama grew up, and there was all this, and all right, yeah, now I kind of get the whole wall of flowers. I'm just make a really nice portrait. He could have been.
It looks really Hawaiian to me.
Well, it was better than Kenyan, right?
Well, I mean, I think it actually melds together all of the beautiful colors of the world that he represents.
All right. So, I wasn't a big fan, but they're nice work. I can't draw a stick figure, so I'm impressed when people can do much better.
Let me tell you something. I'm just happy to look at Michelle and Barack Obama on any day. I really am. And I'm just happy to just be reminded that they were there, and that there was a time when, things were better than they are today.
Yeah, when there was a day I could wake up and not having to worry about the end coming.
Exactly.
Jane, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Have a great week.
Always great talking with you, our good friend Propane Jane. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I don't believe that God wants me to give my money to someone like you, but I do believe in what a crazy man can do.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was founded. During the early years of the 20th century, the NAACP developed legal strategies to challenge anti-black violence and segregation. W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, Archibald Grimke, and Florence Kelley were just a few of the white and black intellectuals and activists who founded the organization. They sensed the urgency for a civil rights organization in the wake of the 1908 race riot in Springfield, Illinois. They hoped to combat the rapid growth of lynchings and Jim Crow statutes. Membership ballooned to almost 90,000 in less than 10 years, with more than 50 branches nationwide. These leaders opposed the gradualism of Booker T. Washington and fought to convince whites of the need for racial equality. The NAACP investigated lynchings and targeted voter disenfranchisement and segregation through a series of lawsuits. They established a legal defense fund that organized support for the Scottsboro Boys and similar cases. They undertook the campaign to overturn the separate but equal doctrine of Plessy versus Ferguson. This resulted in the 1954 landmark decision, Brown versus Board of Education. The NAACP played a central role in the civil rights movement, with Rosa Parks as its secretary. They helped to organize the Montgomery bus boycott, were centrally involved in the campaign to integrate schools in Little Rock, Arkansas, and mobilized for the 1963 March on Washington for jobs and freedom. They also worked successfully toward the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The NAACP continues its important advocacy work today with some 425,000 members.
It's not enough. What have you given? A little bit more.
Yes, there are a lot of people who miss Obama. I do too. I got to be honest. Look, I had my problems with his policy choices and the direction, but I never questioned the sanity. I never questioned his competency. Just never did. I'll tell you, miss him. In fact, the weird thing is I've had people tell me they miss George W. Bush. So, I mean, to tell you how bad this administration is. But you know who else misses Barack Obama? Probably more than all the rest of us? Remington, the gun manufacturer. You can't make this up. Only a year after Obama leaves office, Remington is planning on filing bankruptcy. Can't make it up. Evidently, the people who brought us the Frontier Flintlocks and the U.S. Army 45s, they could be going, well, boom, because no more threat of Obama coming and taking your guns. No more NRA going there. Obama's coming for your guns. Even though there was never, ever a chance of that happening. There was never, ever a piece of legislation that would get out of anywhere. And look, what I argue happened to Remington, they lived fat and happy during the Obama years, and they got people to buy a whole bunch of guns, and now people are gunned out. All the market saturated early, and it's over. So they're going broke, and good on them. Good on them. But back to the Trump thing for a minute. Trump's one of these guys who, and I think Jane's right. He sees these people and they're all good people, and they wouldn't do any of this stuff. I mean, he has defended Roger Ailes, who now everybody knows was actually watching people on closed caption television while they were getting undressed. I mean, talk about creepy. The kind of guy who sticks a camera in the bathroom. He defended Bill O'Reilly, said he's a good person. He said, I don't think Bill did anything wrong, even though we now know that, Mr. Loofah Sponge and Falafel was harassing anybody who would answer the phone. He actually even defended Bill Clinton. Said, I don't necessarily agree with his victims. His victims are terrible. He is really a victim himself, but he put himself in that position. The whole group, Paula Jones, Lewinsky, it's just really a really unattractive group. And I'm not just talking about physical. This is the guy who's our president. He actually even defended Mike Tyson. And, of course, defended himself. Because, all those people are horrible. And this is where we are. And it's... Understand, at least 22 women have come forward against Trump to say that he's done something in the misconduct world. And then you throw that with the tape. How he ever became president, beyond me. I know, the evangelicals, they don't care. They got their Supreme Court justice. That's all they wanted. And if they would have thought that putting a pedophile in the Senate would have helped them get the abortion overturned, they'd have done that too. Weird, bizarre times we live in, I'll tell you. And look, it's only getting worse as you see the power mongers controlling and dominating our political process. Here in Pennsylvania, as you know, The Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania has said, look, your congressional maps are all screwed up. Redraw them. So the Republicans actually did. Last Friday, we drew the maps. And from what I understand, just as bad, if not worse, with a cute little twist that we'll talk about when we come back. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The bills are creeping through the door. It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our back, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money. We work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations that's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's
Your
voice is
working class
stronger.
radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1880. Labor leader John L. Lewis was born in a company mining town outside of Lucas, Iowa. His father was a Welsh coal miner, and young Lewis followed in his footsteps, entering the Big Hill mine in Lucas at the age of 17. He became a union leader and served as the president of the United Mine Workers of America from 1920 to 1960. Under his leadership, the United Mine Workers became one of the leading unions in the nation. Lewis was an aggressive fighter and strike leader who gained higher wages for his membership while steamrolling his opponents. A thunderous speaker, Time magazine once referred to him as the Lion of the labor movement. In 1935, Lewis and 8 other leaders formed the Committee for Industrial Relations within the American Federation of Labor. Lewis believed it was essential to the future of the labor movement to organize steelworkers. This put the committee at odds with the craft union-dominated AFL. The disagreement eventually led to the CIO splitting from the AFL. The CIO helped establish the United Steelworkers of America and helped organize millions of other industrial workers in the 1930s. Lewis played a major role in helping President Franklin Delano Roosevelt win a landslide re-election in 1936. During World War II, most unions took a no-strike pledge. Lewis was never one to let public opinion get in the way of what he thought was right. He led several strikes during the war, causing public outrage. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson awarded Lewis the Presidential Medal of Freedom. John L. Lewis is most often remembered for the quote, "The workers of the nation were tired of waiting for the corporate industry to right their economic wrongs, to alleviate their social agony, and to grant them their political rights. Despairing of fair treatment, they resolved to do something for themselves." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You may remember we talked about this last week. U.S. District Judge Mark Walker ruled Florida's method of allowing felons the right to vote again unconstitutional. The process by which they give people their rights to vote again unconstitutional. What you've got today is you've got the governor saying, no, our way is the right way. Don't take it away. Understand, Florida is one of only 4 states in the country that denies felons the right to vote forever. You're done. It's over. You're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5 million people in the state of Florida. Now, what's gone on is in Florida, you have to basically go to the governor and beg. So it could be a patronage thing, could be a, hey, I know somebody thing, or it could take up to 7 years, or you may not get it at all. And this is where the court is saying, look, you've got to have some, rational way of making sure that everyone has equal access. And look, Florida, crazy state, but another one of these schemes that the Republicans have pulled to, disenfranchise a large segment of voters, especially poor black voters. Florida being the home of all of that. Now, here in Pennsylvania, the cartoon maps that our districts our congressional districts and, I would argue, our state House and Senate ones. The judge here in Pennsylvania, Supreme Court, has said, look, your congressional maps are screwy, redraw them. The Republicans have done that. And here to talk about, well, are these good? Are they bad? Are they any worse than the other ones? I've asked Micah Sims to come talk with us. He's the executive director of Common Cause Pennsylvania. Micah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me on tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
So the Republicans, I was kind of surprised that they redrew the maps on Friday, hurried up and drew something together. Better, worse, same? What's your thought?
I think after really doing some analysis and having people, we have mappers actually at Common Cause, a wonderful group of outstanding academics who really take their time and really do great analysis. They basically viewed the map as the same as what we currently have, that the map probably gives you a 13-5 advantage for the Republicans. Maybe the Democrats pick up one more seat, but the map does not improve the situation. And part of the funny thing is, Rick, they quickly came out and said, well, it reduces the number of splits in counties, reduces the number of splits in municipalities, thinking that that's the only thing that matters. Well, there are a number of important criteria that go into really assessing whether a map is good or not for democracy.
Right. Now, they're going on the constitutional frame of it's got to be compact and contiguous. And I keep arguing that I want competitive districts. The one cute thing that the Republicans did do is that there's a special election coming up on March 13th. They actually redistricted Connor Lamb, the Democratic candidate, out of that district.
Well, interestingly enough, he's not the only one that got booted out of their district. There is a Democratic candidate who was looking to go against Congressman Marino in the 10th. She was moved out of her district, according to their map. There's a candidate by the name of Hallahan in the 6th who was looking to run in that race, but looks like by the map that they offered, she's moved out of the 6th congressional district. So it wasn't just Connor Lamb. While I want him to feel special tonight, he can't be the only one. Looks like there was some targeted effort possibly done by the Republicans to move some oppositional candidates out of their district.
Color me shocked. Come on.
Well,
and again, to me, Micah, this is another one of those. This should be, exhibit triple X, Y, X, Z, in the case to say this is why politicians shouldn't be in charge of drawing the maps.
Well, I think that's ultimately the ultimate fix here in Pennsylvania and probably really in the country. I know California has done an outstanding job with their independent commission. We're looking at right now, Ohio has a ballot initiative that hits the ballot this year that is going to alter their redistricting process. A number of states are doing it. And I think it's high time that we here in Pennsylvania do the same thing, that the ultimate fix is to go to a nonpartisan independent commission to not only do the drawing of the congressional maps, but I heard you just say, listen, we've got some state Senate and some state rep maps that are probably worse than the congressional maps that we see. So I think it needs to happen all the way across the board.
No, absolutely. I mean, you go back to that simple, that mindless statement of, the voters should be picking the politicians, not the other way around.
Correct.
This kind of stands in that. But, look, there's also part of me that says I'm not entirely against the idea of gerrymandering if we can make it that we have competitive districts, that you try and get some parity between, not obscenely gerrymandered like the one down in Philadelphia or the one that they tried, here in Pennsylvania with Pacola's district back on the last map that completely encircled Harrisburg. But, I want to have some balance. I want there to be some competition. I think that's what's best for us.
As I say to everybody, for our goal at Common Cause as a nonpartisan good government group, I just want a level playing field. I realize that because of the way and where people live, you're just not going to get that. You're a great example. You're not going to have that in Philadelphia. However, I do think there is an opportunity to create a level playing field in the middle of the state. There's an opportunity to create a level playing field in places like Delaware County and Chester County, where people ought to feel like, hey, my voice and my vote is going to matter. Right now, that just doesn't seem to be happening when you look at this map. And again, 3 consecutive election cycles, 13-5, 13-5, 13-5. This is, as once again, one of my favorite lines to repeat about the Supreme Court hearing in Pennsylvania was Justice Weck saying, your clients didn't just do it. They were extreme. They overreached in their attempt to do a gerrymander. So I agree with you. I think competitiveness, reaction to the map. There ought to be some responsiveness to creating competitive maps. Remember, the goal is to get people out and to vote. And if we aren't creating districts that look like people's votes matter, there's nothing we can do. And it also encourages people to run. And I think that's oftentimes, you know this, Rick, we see a number of positions that are oftentimes left with no competition, with no opponent, whether in the primary or the general election. And that's just not how democracy works. But people are frustrated. They don't see the willingness to spend 6 months. And it's an uphill climb, and you know I feel passionate about that, and so creating the level playing field is where we really need to get to. Competitiveness is important, and even when we look at the compactness, sometimes we miss the fact that there are communities of interest, and so you have to sometimes offer that opportunity where there are communities of interest. Right now on the current map that you see offered by the Republicans, if you look at Delaware County, here's a great eye test. They took out every major pocket of Democrat and particularly African-American voters out of that district and pushed it into the 1st Congressional District in Philadelphia. That made no sense because if there's anything, the people of Delaware County in totality need to have one voice to select who they want to choose to represent them in Congress.
Yeah. Now, you said the goal here is to get people to vote. And now I know you've said this is a nonpartisan group. So let me be the partisan one saying that I don't know that that's the goal of everyone in our General Assembly. And I would argue that the Republicans nationwide don't want everyone to vote because I look at some of the schemes, some of the scams, some of the obstacles that they've attempted to put into way, like voter ID laws, registration changes. You go down the list, the felons stuff, like the caging that happened. Also the cross check that's coming, all of this stuff is not to get more people to vote, Mike. It's to get more people not to vote.
And I think it's incumbent upon Common Cause Pennsylvania, the League of Women Voters, and the Committee of 70, other good government groups, Commonwealth Common Sense, other good government groups to really stand up against that type of movement and to also go to the other end of the spectrum. And I don't mean necessarily politically, but go to the other extreme and try to find ways when we can really improve voter turnout. We've looked at analysis across the country where we look at early voting is a way to improve voter turnout. No excuse absentee ballots is another way to help improve voter turnout and vote in elections. And so we have to be able to arm ourselves up with the right things to do. I would also say to you, Rick, that another piece is making sure that our voting machines are up to date. I think that's important. I think redistricting and remapping is just one level of this whole narrative of really creating an effective, true reflective democracy.
Yeah, see, we will agree. We will disagree on the updated machines. I'm of the mindset the only updates I want to do to the voting machines are with a large hammer.
Well, how about this? I will commend Governor Wolf after taking it was a good group, a good committee that came out with a report that if we are going to do new voting technology, if we're going to do new voting machines, it's important that there is a paper trail because there needs to be some level of accountability. That way, people can feel a little bit more comfortable. And, Rick, to think about this, in this world of technology, guess what we're looking for in reference to voter machines? Paper. Incredible.
No, I mean, look, you have to have that trail. And at the end of the day, I've said from the very beginning of all this, go back to, to 2001 when a lot of this stuff came up. I go to the ATM machine, it spits me out a receipt. I'm able to see it. There is no sense in my mind that I cast my vote and I have no idea where it goes. I should get a piece of paper and I go, yep, that's it. And I put it in another box to where if there's a question, we go to the paper.
We go to the paper. Count the paper. Count the paper.
It's that simple. But, let me ask you back to the maps now. Because the Republicans did what they were supposed to do. By the 9th, they redrew the maps. The governor now evidently has these maps, has until the 15th. Any word on what the governor's thinking? Any idea where this is going to go?
So I don't have any idea what the governor is thinking. I try to stay out of it and in it all at the same time. Well, what we are hearing, and I've seen published reports even tonight indicating that on tomorrow that the Democrats could possibly be offering their own version of a map, which is interesting. And that probably at the end of the day, the governor rejects the current Republican map that is in front of us. With that being said, it looks as if this is headed to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to draw a map.
Right.
I think that it's two-sided. I think that's a comfortable feeling to know that the justices at the end of the day will handle this matter. I think it's uncomfortable to see a breakdown in our government, to see how we can't even come together to at least do a map. And I mean, we're not talking like a legislative, a Senate, and a congressional map. We're just talking a congressional map. And we're not talking about 24 or 36 districts, Rick. We're talking about 18 districts that we cannot even get together. The Republicans won't even allow the Democrats to have a conversation, be in the room when they do it. They won't even put it on the floor to allow everybody to have conversation and debate on the map. No, we're just going to hand over a map, and we probably know it doesn't pass the test, and so we know we're going to send this thing into chaos. This shows the dysfunction around mapping and the redrawing of districts here in Pennsylvania, one which we at Common Cause, along with a number of our other allies and partners, believe it's time to take it out of the hands of the politicians and bring it into an independent redistricting commission.
Absolutely agree with you, but I got a question where you've been for the last year at least, 9 to going back. Look, we shut the government down over allowing people who were educated here in this country, have been productive members of society, allowing them to stay in their jobs and in their careers in their homes. We shut the government down because didn't want kids to have health insurance. I mean, maps are the least of my thoughts at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, the governor gave a speech recently, his budget address. We've got some major budget concerns that we need to face. How do we improve the funding to education? Again, back to the voter technology. How do we improve that? How do we deal with our social services? How do we address a budget deficit? How do we address accountability, transparency, ethics reform in our government? The least we should be having to do is just to be dealing with how to draw maps according to a constitutional law or according to a judicial decision. I think that's rough, and I think once again it speaks to what is happening currently in our government. You raised a great point about Florida. People are trying to suppress the vote. They're trying to build walls. They're trying to create division. They're trying to create all kind of things that would just make people frustrated at democracy. But I'm starting to believe, Rick, that it's actually not working. It's actually starting to work against them, that people are starting to get riled up. They're starting to pay attention. When you look at groups like Fair Districts PA and Represent Pennsylvania and other groups, PA Voices, other grassroots organizations that are out there every single day meeting the needs of people, we're finding that grassroots effort is starting to happen, and I think it's going to not only sweep into the voting that process that is going to happen in 2018, but I think it's going to speak about the necessity of creating reform inside of our government, both at the state, federal, and local level.
I hope you're right. Last question I've got on the maps. It's my view that the Republicans are playing this along so that when the court does draw a map, this is going to give them an opening to take it back to the U.S. Supreme Court, just to kind of stall this along, to delay this out for another cycle. I'm curious your thoughts on ultimately how you see this playing out and how you see this playing out in the next couple of weeks.
I think, unfortunately, I don't see us getting a map from the legislature, and I don't see the governor signing on to one, which means we get a map from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I do think at that point we're going to see the Republicans then file in federal court to stay the map and claim something like due process, or claim, because that's not constitutional law, that that the judicial branch ought to be drawing maps, et cetera. I do believe that since the United States Supreme Court denied their stay the first time, I think they're going to deny it a second time, and I really think that the maps that we are getting ready to have for 2018 will apply, and that we'll be going to our polling places across this Commonwealth for the first time this decade, and actually be voting on constitutional maps for the first time. Rick, it's incredible to just think about this, that people's vote will actually matter, and they will actually be able to have representation that is constitutional in Washington, D.C. So that's my optimistic outlook. I don't really see. You can have a couple of legal twists here and there, but I think you've seen what the United States Supreme Court has already said. I think they hold to that. I think we've got Matt and Rick to tell your listeners, guess what? We're right back at this process again in 3 years.
Yep.
2020, here comes the census, and we're drawing maps again on 2021. That's why we know that this is just step one. We've got to fix the process, not just put a Band-Aid on it.
And then, obviously, in 2020, we've got to make sure that they don't rig the census. A whole nother fight for a whole nother day.
Thing. Whole nother day. Yeah, exactly.
Mike, I appreciate the time. Good stuff. Love to have you come back
Rick,
and talk with us again.
Be glad to, Rick. Thank you and your listeners for everything that you guys are doing to help promote democracy, not only in Pennsylvania, but really across America as well. Have a great night.
Good stuff. Thanks so much, Micah. You want to check out their website, commoncause.org/PA. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day that the labor leader known as Mother Jones was arrested in West Virginia. She was there to support coal miners during the Paint and Cabin Creek strike of 1912-1913. The West Virginia coal fields were one of the bloodiest sites of labor conflict in U.S. history. The bosses had evicted the striking workers from their company homes. As a result, the strikers lived in tent camps under dire conditions. 83-year-old Mother Jones visited these camps where she gave fiery speeches. In the fall, she organized a march of the miners' children through the streets of Charleston, West Virginia. Authorities saw Mother Jones as a troublemaker and wanted to expel her from their state. On February 7th, guards hired by the bosses attacked one of the miner camps with a machine gun mounted on an armored train. One striker died. The workers responded with an attack of their own, thus giving the governor the excuse to declare martial law. Mother Jones was arrested and put on trial for murder at a military court. The basis for her arrest was a speech she had given 3 months earlier. Mother Jones refused to recognize the authority of the trial, writing in her autobiography that my arrest and trial were unconstitutional. She was convicted and sentenced to 20 years. It was during this trial that Mother Jones was called the most dangerous woman in America. The sentence of this well-known labor leader spurred national outrage. The United States Senate ordered an investigation into the conditions of the West Virginia coal mines. West Virginians elected a new governor who released the beloved Mother Jones. Upon her release, she continued fighting for workers until the day she died at 100 years old. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascist or bound to lose?
You know, you look at these, all of the ways that, and give Republicans credit. You have to give the moneyed interest lots of credit. That they came out with a game plan, 1971, the Powell memo, and they stuck with it. They invested in it. Even when they were taking thumpings and they were getting beaten, they stuck with it. They kept investing in it, kept spending money, kept building, to the point to where now they control our media. They control our elections. They control most of the majority of the governor's mansions. In fact, almost as many, they almost have enough governor's mansions to amend the Constitution. Scary, scary stuff. And how'd they do it? Well, they did it the old-fashioned way. They took over media. They took over parts of education. They invested in talking heads. They took over, all of talk radio and, television. They've dominated for a very long time. And, even regular, not just talk radio, but even regular turn on the radio to listen to music, even those DJs are all right-wing idiots because it's what they're paid to do. And you think about some of the stuff that's come out over the years about how the Koch brothers have spent all of this money on buying professor seats. And the most famous being Florida State University, where they gave $2 million to the university. And for that $2 million a year, they got veto power over any economics professor hired in their business department. Do you think that's power? Where you're training a generation of minds to think in a very libertarian, laissez-faire economic kind of way, that whatever business wants, business gets, that tax cuts create jobs, that tax cuts grow the amount of money coming into the government. I mean, stop and think about it. They have done a masterful job. And on the voter front, since 2000, they've really been the ones who figured out how to rig the election. Every election has had some issues. You go back to Florida in 2000, the whole voting while black thing, threw 90,000 black people off the voting rolls because they were suspected felons. And yet, a lot of the people on the list weren't. In fact, there were some who hadn't even committed the felony yet. You go to 2004, they did the caging stuff, where, they sent a letter to your house, and, if you didn't respond, it got sent back and put in a cage. And you got thrown off the voting rolls. And you go down the list. The voter ID thing was just another way to suppress the vote. Because they know who doesn't have an ID. They know who's not going to go get an ID. Poor people. Low-wage working people who don't have cars. Seniors. Students. Oh, yeah. People who generally vote for Democrats. Convenient, don't you think? And now this cross-check thing. As we've been talking about here on the show, we've talked about it a number of times. Well, your name sounds like somebody else's name. You must both be. In fact, the last time we had Greg Palast on the show, he sent me a list of all of the Rick Smiths in several state area. And if they chose Rick Smith, they could petition the state to have me thrown off the voting rolls if Pennsylvania were one of the states that were involved in the cross-check. Could there be a Rick Smith in more than one state? I would think so. I Google my name and there's more than one of me. And yet, if Chris Kobach, who wants to be governor of Kansas, and the voter fraud people get their way, all the Rick Smiths could be thrown off the voting rolls. If it's assumed that I would vote for a Democrat. I mean, that's how this stuff plays out. And this is the scary part of having, pure ideologues deciding what happens with our elections, with the sanctity of our ballot box. Understand, if you lose faith in the results that come out of that box, which is why I've said from the very beginning, at the barest of minimums, there has to be a paper trail. It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever why those machines don't have a little printer that says, oh, here's your vote. This is what you voted at. And you can look at it, you go, yep, voted for that, yep. And if there's a problem right there, then and there, you say, this is wrong. And there's got to be a way to go back and say, okay, we're going to redo this. Where it prints out before you do the final print, something, but there has got to be a way. And then when you're done with that piece of paper, you put it in a box. You say, that's my vote right there. That's your vote. What the computer counts is just a count. That's your vote in that box. That's where we should be going. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. On the right path, off, crazy? I want to hear it. rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go. And as always, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow. So much to get to.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sweat.